I miscarried. At 7 months and 1 week later, my husband had my estranged half-sister carrying our baby through IVF, and after a whole pregnancy of acting like it was their child, I found the manila envelope my husband had been hiding from me, then gave it to him, and watched him squirm as he was forced to confront the truth. I was 7 months pregnant, painting my baby's crib with spring grass green when I felt the sharp pain in my stomach. Next thing I knew, I was on the floor, bleeding out, begging the universe not to take her. By the time we arrived at the hospital, my belly was flat, my lower body was drenched in blood, and I was repeatedly pinching myself to wake up from this nightmare. Just 7 days later, while I was still in bed surrounded by baby clothes I couldn't bring myself to throw out, my husband slammed the door open looking happier than he should be. "I have a surprise, honey." He dragged me out of bed and carried me downstairs, and that's when I saw her, my half-sister, who I'd cut contact with 3 years ago after I caught her sleeping with my ex. At first I was too numb to even react, until my husband told me he has great news. Kathy here had agreed to carry our baby via IVF. I just stared at him as he continued. "Not only that, but the surrogate papers are already signed. We signed for you because we knew you'd want this," my husband told me. In hindsight, I know I should have fought them, but I was way too devastated, and instead chose to believe that their intentions were pure. And so, when just 2 weeks in I walked into the kitchen to see my husband rubbing her belly, I told myself he was just excited for our kid. When I saw Kathy taking my ultrasound photos out of our family album, I smiled along. I even went to all the IVF appointments with them. I watched him and Kathy sitting there, touching each other's arms and looking at each other like I wasn't even there, and I still nodded and told myself this was okay. But then they started calling the baby ours, in reference to all three of us. Started going through our dead daughter's clothes together. They'd hold up her tiny pink onesies against Kathy's stomach and smile. "I can't wait to see our little one in this." My husband never really noticed how it affected me either. He didn't pay attention when I suddenly stopped eating with them, too busy giving her neck rubs to reduce stress, too busy taking my paycheck and spending it on organic salads for her and only her. I'd press those old ultrasound pictures against my belly and cry into them at night, and the most he'd do was hand me water and go back to sleep. The breaking point came on what should have been my due date. I desperately wanted to go back to the beach where I felt my baby's first ever kicks. I woke Mark up and begged him to take me there, just so I could remember what life was like. His face lit up. "I actually have something even better than that planned." I smiled for the first time since the miscarriage. "What is it?" I asked excitedly, playfully hitting his arm. "Me and Kathy organized a surprise baby shower. It's today." I stared at him waiting for him to say he was joking, but he never did. In fact, he actually got Kathy to come up, and together they told me they decided it would be better for me to spend the day celebrating life instead of the dead baby. I looked blankly at the both. "I'm not comfortable with that," I said. It was the first time I'd pushed back against them the entire time. My husband's face changed completely. "You're being selfish," he instantly snapped back. "Can't you just be happy for us?" Kathy squealed. My jaw dropped. "Yourself," my husband nudged her shoulder. "Happy for yourself." I didn't even say another word, just grabbed my car keys and headed out in my pajamas. I heard them whisper arguing in the background. 4 hours later, I found myself at a cafe, getting a FaceTime from my husband. I answered, and saw that they indeed hosted the baby shower. "Just wanted to let you know we've decided to hyphenate our daughter's name to include Kathy to honor her sacrifice." Click. They hung up, didn't even wait for my reaction. I think that was my real breaking point. I decided I was done. I waited until 2 a.m. to come home that night. I didn't even need an excuse because neither of them texted me. Once inside, I picked the lock to Mark's office. He had always kept it locked, and because I trusted him, I never pried. Until tonight. I started digging, and that's when in one of the folders hidden behind some tax files, I found a manila envelope. I opened it expecting tax returns like all the other envelopes, but I was wrong. Instead, I found fertility clinic documents dated 2 months before my miscarriage. There was nothing inherently stated in them, but it was enough to load up his computer and start digging. And there, on his backup email, I found a thread between him and Kathy spanning for 9 months at that point. The very first thing she sent was receipts for her genetic testing. I felt sick already, but then I started reading, and stumbled upon the email that made me want to vomit. My husband wrote, "If she's still pregnant by May, we'll need to consider alternative approaches." Kathy's reply, "The medication you mentioned, how long before it works?" That's when I heard the voice. "She knows," Kathy called from the doorway. I froze, my heart pounding. Mark came downstairs basically immediately, eerily calm. "You were never supposed to find out," he said without any emotion. I asked him with this broken voice, "Where did my husband go?" And he just shrugged. He told me he's sorry, but that husband died the minute he found out my genes weren't perfect like Kathy's. According to him, my grandfather on my father's side had schizophrenia, and he couldn't risk passing that on. That's when he offered me the deal. Either stay and play happy family, or leave with nothing and never see the baby again. I stood there in Mark's office at 2 a.m., gripping the printed emails as my hands trembled. The words on the pages blurred through my tears, but their meaning remained crystal clear. They'd planned this. They'd unalived my baby. Mark stepped closer, his face illuminated by the desk lamp. Kathy moved to block the doorway, her hand protectively over her belly, my baby's replacement growing inside her. The gesture made my stomach turn. "You have 60 seconds to decide," Mark said calmly, checking his watch like this was a business negotiation. "Stay and we raise this child together, or leave with nothing." The emails crinkled in my grip. 9 months of messages. 9 months of planning while I'd been blissfully preparing for motherhood, painting cribs and singing lullabies to my growing belly. "You unalived our baby," I whispered, the words scraping my throat raw. Mark's mask slipped for just a moment, something flickering across his face before he composed himself. "It was nature's way," he said, but his hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his collar. "Sometimes these things happen for a reason. Think of this child's future," Kathy added from the doorway, rubbing her stomach and in slow circles. Perfect genes, no risk of mental illness. Isn't that what any parent would want? My mind raced through my options. Call the police? With what proof? These emails were damning but not criminal evidence. Run? Where would I go at 2 a.m. with no money, no plan, no support system? Time's ticking. Mark tapped his watch. I forced my breathing to slow, made my face go blank. If they'd planned this for 9 months, I needed time to think, to plan my own moves. I'll stay, I lied, watching triumph flash across both their faces. Good choice, Mark smiled, reaching for the emails. Now hand those over. I already uploaded them to cloud storage, I said quickly, stepping back. Insurance policy. Kathy's smile faltered at the mention of the cloud, her hand stilling on her belly. Mark's jaw tightened. That's fine, he said after a pause. We're all family here. No secrets needed. He moved toward the door. Come on, let's get you back to bed. You need rest. They escorted me upstairs like guards with a prisoner. When we reached the hallway, Mark steered me past our bedroom toward the guest room. Inside, I saw my clothes already hanging in the closet, my toiletries arranged on the dresser. We moved your things while you were out, Kathy explained sweetly. For my comfort during the pregnancy. Morning sickness, you understand? The door clicked shut behind them. I heard the lock turn from the outside, a lock I hadn't even known existed. Alone finally, I grabbed my phone to access my cloud account. My fingers flew across the screen, but when I tried to log in, an error message appeared. Account locked due to suspicious activity. My blood ran cold. Mark had my passwords. Of course he did. I'd trusted him with everything. Through the heating vent, their voices drifted up from the master bedroom below. She's lying about staying, Kathy said clearly. I know, Mark responded. We have 3 days to figure this out. Papers rustled. The commitment papers just need one more signature. I pressed my ear to the vent, straining to hear more, but their voices dropped to whispers. 3 days. 3 days until what? Hours crawled by. I dozed fitfully in the chair by the window, jerking awake at every sound. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed. Claire's name lit up the screen. Where were you? Missed our coffee date. Everything okay? I stared at the text, reality hitting me. I'd been trapped in negotiations all night. They'd kept me here, wearing me down, making me miss my only standing appointment with a friend. Before I could respond, the door unlocked. Mark entered carrying a tray of breakfast, Kathy hovering behind him. Thought you might be hungry, he said pleasantly, setting it on the dresser. We need those emails deleted from your cloud. Now, I told you insurance policy, I said, not moving from the chair. The thing is, Mark sat on the bed. We can't move forward as a family with threats hanging over our heads. Delete them and we'll unlock your door. Simple. The cloud's already locked. You did that. He smiled. Technical glitch. I'll fix it once you agree to delete everything. Kathy stepped forward. We're trying to help you here. This grief, this paranoia, it's not healthy. Mark's mother is coming for breakfast. Do you really want her to see you like this? Mark's mother. I'd forgotten she was visiting this week. A witness, potentially an ally, or another person they'd convinced I was unstable. Fine, I said. Fix the account. I'll delete them with both of you watching. Mark pulled out his phone, tapped a few times. Try now. I logged in successfully this time, showed them the screen as I moved the emails to trash, then emptied it. Mark nodded, satisfied. See? Was that so hard? He stood. Mother will be here in an hour. Please shower and look presentable. We're announcing the pregnancy officially. They left, but didn't lock the door this time. Small victory. I waited 5 minutes, then crept to the bathroom. My phone camera still worked. I photographed everything suspicious. The new lock on the guest room door, the papers on Mark's desk I could see from the hallway, anything that might help later. In the medicine cabinet, something caught my eye. A prescription bottle, label torn off, but I recognized the pills inside. Misoprostol, the same medication they'd given me after the miscarriage to help expel any remaining tissue. But this bottle was nearly empty, and there was residue in the bottom like pills had been dissolved in liquid. My hands shook as I photographed it from every angle. Evidence. Real evidence. What are you doing? Kathy's voice made me jump. She stood in the bathroom doorway, watching me with cold eyes. I slipped my phone into my pocket, looking for aspirin. Headache. She stepped closer, backing me against the sink. Mark's mother believes you're unstable with grief. One wrong word from you today, and she'll support hospitalization. Temporary, of course. Just until you're better. You mean until the baby's born. Her smile was all teeth. You're learning. Mark's mother arrived right on schedule, gushing over Kathy's barely visible bump while I sat silent at the breakfast table. How brave you're being, she told me, patting my hand. After the miscarriage, that was nobody's fault. These things happen. At least now you'll still have a baby to love. The cover story had already spread. I was the grieving woman saved by her generous sister's surrogacy. Any protest would sound like jealousy or mental breakdown. After breakfast, I excused myself to use the bathroom again. This time I texted Claire quickly. Not okay. Mark controlling everything. Please help. I deleted the message immediately after sending. Days blurred together. They followed me everywhere. To the pharmacy where Mark appeared when I tried to research misoprostol, casually mentioning my history of paranoid episodes to the pharmacist. Back home where my laptop had vanished but my journal was left open to a page about pregnancy fears, clearly photocopied. Even to Kathy's prenatal appointments at the same clinic where I'd lost my baby, Mark insisting I attend as a family. By Monday, my boss called me into her office. Mark called about your grief-induced breakdown, she said gently. Maybe you should take extended leave. We'll hold your position. I tried calling Dr. Patterson, my OB who delivered the devastating news about my miscarriage. His receptionist was apologetic but firm. The doctor wasn't comfortable seeing me given the situation. Someone had gotten to him first. That night, desperate for somewhere they couldn't follow, I drove to my mother's grave. The cemetery was my only safe space, the only place I could think clearly. But even there, fresh flowers lay on her headstone with a card. Thinking of you during this difficult time, Kay. They were everywhere, in every corner of my life. She was a good woman, a voice said behind me. I turned to find a woman about my age arranging flowers on the next grave. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you, you. I just noticed you here a lot lately. You've seen me here before? She nodded. I visit my son, stillborn 2 years ago. She paused. I couldn't help but notice. Are you Kathy's sister? My blood chilled. You know Kathy? We were roommates in college, before she dropped out. The woman arranged her flowers carefully. She was studying reproductive medicine, always fascinated by pregnancy, fertility treatments. Used to say she'd make the perfect surrogate someday because she understood the science so well. The woman's words hung in the air between us as she continued arranging her flowers. I watched her hands move methodically, trying to process what she'd just revealed about Kathy's background. When did she drop out? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The woman straightened up, brushing dirt from her knees. About 3 years ago, right around the time she started dating someone new. Never met him, but she talked about him constantly. Said he was married but planning to leave his wife. My stomach dropped. 3 years ago, when I'd caught Kathy with my ex and cut contact. The timeline was too perfect to be coincidence. I thanked the woman and hurried back to my car, my mind racing. Mark had disabled my vehicle for my safety. I discovered this when I tried to start it and nothing happened. The hood release wouldn't even pop. I had to call for a ride, and of course, Mark appeared within minutes in his car. Cemetery visits aren't healthy right now, he said, opening the passenger door for me. You need to focus on the future, not the past. During the drive home, I noticed him texting at red lights. By the time we arrived, Kathy was waiting on the porch with that same protective hand over her belly. The next morning, Mark removed my name from our joint bank accounts. I discovered this when trying to buy groceries and my card was declined. The cashier's sympathetic look as I fumbled for cash I didn't have burned into my memory. Mark appeared at the store. He'd been tracking my phone and paid with theatrical concern, apologizing to everyone about my difficult time. I recognized the isolation tactic from articles I'd read about coercive control. That afternoon, while they attended another prenatal appointment, I walked to the library and started documenting everything in a notebook I hid behind the genealogy section. Dates, times, conversations, the systematic way they were cutting me off from resources and support. 2 days later, our mailman mentioned something odd as I collected the mail. Your sister's been coming by for months, he said. Used to see her here all the time when you were at work. Thought it was nice you two were close again. Months before my miscarriage. Before the surprise surrogacy arrangement. The surveillance had been happening long before I knew. At work, my coworker Janet noticed my weight loss and hollow eyes. She pulled me aside during lunch, and when I tried to explain Mark's version of events, she shook her head firmly. I've known you for 5 years, she said. You're the most stable person in this office. Whatever's really happening, I don't buy his story. Janet had lived through her own controlling relationship. She recognized the signs and offered me her phone to make calls Mark couldn't track. I used it to screenshot my medical records from the hospital portal before Mark could alter them. They showed no history of mental illness, no previous episodes, nothing but routine pregnancy care until the miscarriage. That evening, I considered calling the police. But what would I say? My husband was controlling our finances? My sister was living in my house? Without proof of what had been in my system 7 months ago? Without evidence of what they'd done? I had nothing but suspicions and emails about genetic contamination. The next day, Janet introduced me to a friend at a coffee shop downtown. The woman was a lawyer who specialized in family law. Off the record, she explained reproductive coercion, financial abuse, the ways abusers use the system against their victims. She validated what I was experiencing but confirmed what I feared. Without concrete evidence of the poisoning, criminal charges would be nearly impossible. Returning home, I found Kathy wearing my jewelry. My mother's pearl necklace hung around her neck as she lounged on the couch. My perfume wafted from her skin. She was slowly erasing me from my own life, replacing my presence piece by piece. That night, a Facebook message appeared from an unknown account. It was Kathy's ex-boyfriend from years ago. He'd found me through mutual connections and wanted to warn me. Kathy had faked a pregnancy to try to trap him, he wrote. When he discovered the deception and tried to leave, she'd threatened to harm herself and blame him. Only his family's lawyer had saved him from her manipulations. The next morning, I confronted Kathy privately in the kitchen while Mark showered. I mentioned her medical background, her history with fake pregnancies. She remained perfectly calm, placing that hand on her belly again in that theatrical way she had. Who's going to believe the crazy woman over the pregnant one? She asked simply. Mark's already laid the groundwork. Your boss, your doctor, his family, everyone knows you're unstable with grief. I'm just the loving sister helping you through a difficult time. That afternoon, Mark issued an ultimatum. Either I attended grief counseling with his chosen therapist, or I needed to leave immediately. The choice was mine, he said magnanimously, but he couldn't watch me spiral any longer. I agreed to the therapy, seeing it as a potential opportunity. Dr. Brennan's office was sterile and cold, but I noticed her frowning as Mark described my delusions and paranoid episodes. When he mentioned waiting 7 days after my miscarriage to help me, she made a note, her pen pausing on the paper. That seems like a long time to wait when your wife is grieving, she observed mildly. Mark shifted in his seat, launching into an explanation about giving me space, but I caught the way Dr. Brennan's eyes narrowed slightly. When he finally left us alone for individual assessment, I broke down and told her everything. The emails, the timeline, the systematic isolation. Her expression shifted from professional skepticism to genuine concern. She stopped taking notes and really listened. That evening, Mark offered me a deal. $10,000 and a glowing job reference if I left quietly and signed an NDA. He presented it like a generous gift, a way for me to start fresh somewhere else. When I refused, his mask dropped completely. He leaned back in the living room chair, eyes cold. You think anyone will hire you after I'm done? I've already laid the groundwork. One word from me about your mental state and your career is over. Choose carefully. The next day, while they attended yet another prenatal appointment, I searched Kathy's room. Hidden in her suitcase, I found medical textbooks with highlighted sections about inducing miscarriage safely. The margins contained handwritten notes, dosage age calculations, timing recommendations. My hands shook as I photographed every page with Janet's phone. Deeper in the suitcase, I discovered printed emails between Mark and Kathy dated 3 months before my miscarriage. Contingency plans if she's still pregnant by summer. One subject line read. The messages discussed timing, methods, how to make it look natural. They'd been planning this for so long. I met Emma at a diner that evening. My cousin had never believed Mark's story about my breakdown, had always found him controlling. When I showed her what I'd found, she teared up, remembering how happy I'd been during my pregnancy, how I'd called her crying with joy after feeling the first kicks. I'll help however I can, she promised. Family pressure be damned. At my next therapy session, Dr. Brennan couldn't break confidentiality but suggested I document everything and mentioned parallel construction in a meaningful way. She was telling me to build my case independently, to gather evidence that could stand on its own. I became strategic. Instead of stealing evidence that could make me look guilty, I photographed everything with Janet's phone and returned items exactly as I'd found them. I built my documentation carefully, methodically, the way they'd built their plan against me. Sunday family dinner became my first test. I mentioned Kathy's medical background casually, asking innocent questions about her studies. She choked on her water while Mark's mother perked up with interest. She hadn't known about the medical training. I planted seeds of doubt carefully, watching them exchange panicked looks across the table. Later that week, Janet helped me access my old email backups from work. We found message after message between Mark and me about baby names, nursery plans, my pure joy at becoming a mother, evidence of how much I'd wanted this child, how invested I'd been in the pregnancy. Mark's mother started noticing things too. The way Mark talked over me at meals, how Kathy had taken my place at the table, using my dishes, sitting in my chair. The older woman's eyes began following their interactions with growing suspicion. During Wednesday dinner, I asked more innocent questions. Kathy, didn't you once tell me you were afraid of pregnancy? What changed your mind about surrogacy? Mark and Kathy exchanged those panicked looks again. Their story was starting to crack under gentle pressure. Through Emma's connections, I met a nurse from the hospital where I'd lost my baby. Over coffee, she mentioned remembering my case because the miscarriage had presented strangely, more consistent with medical intervention than natural loss. She couldn't say more officially, but her words confirmed what I'd suspected. That night, I confronted Mark alone in his office. I told him I knew about the medication, about their plans. He leaned back in his chair with cold confidence. Prove it, he said simply. At the next therapy session, Dr. Brennan suggested Mark attend solo sessions to better support me. His refusal was immediate and defensive, raising red flags she carefully noted. She was building her own documentation, I realized. Kathy's pregnancy began showing more prominently, but I noticed inconsistencies. She clutched her belly and moaned about morning sickness when Mark was around, but I caught her doing jumping jacks in her room when she thought she was alone. The performance was just that, a performance. The ex-boyfriend sent more evidence through Facebook. Photos of Kathy from years ago with different-sized pregnancy bumps on the same day. She'd been patting her clothes, faking the whole thing. The pattern of deception stretched back years. Instead of confronting them immediately, I took a different approach. Over tea with Mark's mother, I expressed concern about Kathy's history without making accusations. I mentioned her dropping out of medical school, her past relationships, letting Mark's mother draw her own conclusions. The seeds of reasonable doubt were planted. Over the next week, Emma and Janet recruited 2 more friends who'd never believed Mark's story. They formed a quiet support network, checking on me daily despite Mark's attempts to intercept their calls and visits. The isolation was breaking down. Mark's next move was desperate. He tried to have me committed for a 72-hour psychiatric hold, but Dr. Brennan refused to sign the papers, stating clearly that she saw no evidence of danger to myself or others. His plan was failing. The crack in their relationship showed first when Mark's mother caught them kissing intimately in the kitchen. Not a friendly peck, but deep, passionate, like lovers. When confronted, Kathy admitted they were in love, but insisted the IVF story was real, that she was just helping her grieving sister while happening to fall for her brother-in-law. Mark's mother's expression hardened. The betrayal went deeper than she'd imagined. Word spread through the family quickly. Mark scrambled to control the narrative, claiming I was poisoning people against them, but the cracks were widening. Too many people had noticed too many things. I met with the nurse again privately. She reviewed my medical records and confirmed what she'd suspected. The miscarriage presentation was consistent with medical intervention, not natural loss. She couldn't testify officially without risking her license, but her confirmation strengthened my resolve. Mark's mother gave me an ultimatum of her own, 1 week to sort this out, before she called a full family meeting. The clock was ticking, but this time in my favor. The pressure cracked their united front. I overheard Kathy threatening Mark during an argument, demanding he secure her financial future, or she'd reveal what really happened. They were turning on each other. The stakes crystallized clearly. I had to expose them before they could create a unified story or potentially flee together. But this time, I wouldn't confront them alone. I gathered my allies at Janet's house. Emma, Janet, 2 other friends, even Mark's brother who'd admitted Mark had asked him about untraceable medications months ago. Together, we had witness testimony, documentation, a pattern of behavior that couldn't be dismissed as delusion. The confrontation came at Mark's mother's house with all my supporters present. They couldn't gaslight everyone at once. When Mark tried his usual manipulation, claiming I'd caused my own miscarriage through negligence and stress, his mother was recording everything on her phone. Kathy made one last attempt to maintain her victim narrative, claiming I'd known about the surrogacy plan all along and was having a breakdown from grief. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the medical knowledge, the pattern of deception, the witness testimonies. Mark's mother demanded the truth. And finally, cornered with no escape, Mark's careful control cracked. Mark's mother asked Mark to leave her home, devastated by the kiss she witnessed, and the web of lies lies. The tension in the room was suffocating as Mark stood frozen, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. Over the following days, Emma, Janet, and other friends rallied around me, helping me reclaim my life piece by piece. They accompanied me to the bank where I opened my own account, to the locksmith who changed the locks on what was still technically my home too, and to meetings with divorce attorneys who specialized in financial abuse cases. Dr. Brennan offered to write a statement about Mark's controlling behavior for divorce proceedings if needed. Her professional validation carried weight that my word alone never could have. At the family meeting Mark's mother had called, I presented the full truth. Dates, documents, witness statements, creating an undeniable timeline. Even the family members who'd initially doubted me found themselves convinced by the mountain of evidence. The emails between Mark and Kathy, the medical textbooks with dosage calculations, the testimony from multiple witnesses who'd seen concerning behavior, it all painted a clear picture. The family collectively decided to support me over Mark, recognizing the pattern of manipulation and control that had been invisible when viewed in isolation, but became obvious when assembled together. Kathy, sensing the tide had turned completely, agreed to reveal the affair timeline, but maintained the miscarriage was natural, and she was just helping her grieving sister. Her performance fell flat. Everyone could see through it now. My meticulous documentation prevented Mark from spinning alternative narratives, as every claim he made could be immediately countered with evidence. When he claimed I'd been unstable for months, I had emails showing my normal work performance. When he insisted the surrogacy was my idea, I had witnesses who'd heard him and Kathy planning it while I was grieving. The complete evidence package sat on the table at the family meeting. Everyone understood that criminal prosecution was unlikely without proof of poisoning, but social consequences were already taking effect. Mark's business partners were pulling back, having heard through the family grapevine about his behavior. His reputation in our community was crumbling. Family members expressed horror and shame for believing Mark's lies, offering both emotional and financial support to help me rebuild. His brother was particularly apologetic, admitting he should have spoken up when Mark asked about those medications. Mark, cornered and desperate, arrived at the meeting with legal documents claiming power of attorney over me due to mental incompetence. He'd brought a psychiatrist and security guard to enforce involuntary commitment. My support network tensed, facing this new legal intimidation. Even Mark's mother wavered momentarily, unsure if the legal documents might be valid. The psychiatrist began asking me questions while Mark coached from the sidelines, trying to make me appear unstable. Drawing on my documentation and Dr. Brennan's coaching, I calmly answered every question. I presented my evidence methodically, showing the clear timeline of abuse and control. I explained the isolation tactics, the financial manipulation, the systematic destruction of my support systems. The psychiatrist reviewed everything, the emails about genetic contamination, the timeline showing Mark and Kathy's relationship predated my miscarriage, the evidence of financial abuse. After an hour of assessment, he declared me mentally sound and competent. Mark's plan crumbled as the psychiatrist noted that Mark himself might benefit from evaluation. As family and witnesses remained gathered, all parties faced the truth. Mark's control was broken, his plans exposed. He could no longer manipulate the narrative or gaslight anyone. His story unraveled further as he contradicted himself about dates and plans. My consistent account, backed by evidence, stood firm against his shifting explanations. He tried to claim the emails were taken out of context, then that they were jokes, then that I'd misunderstood everything. Finally, perhaps trying to salvage something, he revealed that Kathy was 3 months pregnant with his child. The affair had started right after my miscarriage when he was supposedly comforting her. The family's disgust was palpable. Mark's mother, still recording, captured his next admission. In his frustration, he let slip that he'd helped nature along because of genetic concerns. Not a full confession, but enough. His mother's face went pale as she realized her son had essentially admitted to causing my miscarriage. I faced a choice then: pursue an unlikely criminal case with limited evidence, or accept social justice and freedom from the marriage. I chose divorce and ensuring everyone knew the truth. Sometimes social exile is the only justice available. Mark left the family meeting in disgrace. Kathy desperately tried to maintain her victim narrative, but the community had turned against them both. Her attempts to blame me for the situation fell flat. The evidence and witness testimony were overwhelming. Mark made one last attempt to claim I was genetically inferior, that he'd done what was necessary to prevent a damaged child. This final statement only further alienated him from everyone present. Even those who might have felt some sympathy for him recoiled at his eugenics-based justification. The next day, I stood in my reclaimed home, surrounded by real supporters. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, despite everything that had happened there. Emma helped me pack away the nursery items, treating each piece with the reverence it deserved. Janet organized a security system installation. Other friends brought groceries and helped me establish new routines. Mark's mother visited to apologize personally. She'd been reviewing the recording and noticed things she'd missed before: subtle admissions, contradictions, the cold calculation in her son's voice. She offered to testify in divorce proceedings if needed. Through the window, I watched Mark loading boxes into his car. His mother had given him a week to find somewhere else to stay. He moved mechanically, all his usual confidence gone. Kathy's pregnancy progressed, but Mark had already distanced himself from her. She'd served her purpose in his plan, and now she was just a liability. She would raise his child alone after he abandoned her for ruining everything. The poetic justice wasn't lost on anyone. The divorce proceedings moved forward with unusual speed. Mark's attempts to hide assets failed when my lawyer, recommended by Janet's friend, found the accounts he'd opened in preparation for leaving me. The financial abuse documentation Dr. Brennan provided proved invaluable. My workplace welcomed me back with understanding. Janet had quietly explained the real situation to key people, countering Mark's narrative. My boss apologized for believing his lies and offered flexibility as I rebuilt my life. life. Dr. Patterson, my original OB, reached out through his nurse. He'd been told I was dangerously unstable, but learning the truth, he offered to provide medical documentation about my miscarriage presentation. While not definitive proof of poisoning, his notes about the unusual symptoms added to the overall picture. Emma introduced me to a different therapist, one I chose myself. The sessions focused on processing the trauma and rebuilding my sense of self after months of gaslighting. This therapist specialized in reproductive coercion and recognized the patterns immediately. 3 months into the divorce process, Kathy attempted to contact me. She was struggling with the pregnancy alone, facing the reality of single motherhood. I didn't respond. She'd made her choices. Mark's business began failing as word spread through professional networks. The man who'd been so concerned about genetic perfection found himself socially and professionally tainted by his own actions. The house felt truly mine again as I repainted the nursery, covering the dusty rows with a neutral beige. Not erasing the past, but creating space for whatever future I chose. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. The settlement reflected the court's recognition of the financial abuse and Mark's attempts to hide assets. I received the house and enough support to truly start over. My support network had become my chosen family. Emma, Janet, and the others who'd believed me when it mattered most remained constant presences. We'd formed bonds through crisis that proved stronger than blood. Through my new therapist, I connected with other women who'd experienced reproductive coercion. Their stories echoed mine in heartbreaking ways. The isolation, the gaslighting, the systematic destruction of support systems. We formed a quiet support group, meeting monthly to share our experiences and healing journeys. I returned to work full-time, throwing myself into projects with renewed purpose. The competence Mark had tried to undermine reasserted itself. My colleagues noticed the change, the return of confidence, the absence of the constant anxiety that had marked my final months with Mark. One evening, while organizing paperwork, I found the ultrasound photos I'd pressed against my belly during those dark nights. The pain was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I created a small memorial box for my daughter. The photos, a tiny onesie, the spring grass green paint chip from the nursery. Not hiding from the grief, but giving it a proper place. Mark's mother maintained contact, despite her son's protests. She'd chosen justice over blind family loyalty, a choice that couldn't have been easy. During one visit, she mentioned that Mark had moved to another state, still unable to accept responsibility for his actions. Kathy gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The child who was supposed to be my daughter's replacement became another victim of their schemes. Mark sent minimal support and had no interest in involvement. Kathy's dreams of a perfect family with him had crumbled just as thoroughly as mine had. Through the support group, I learned about new medical protocols being developed to better identify cases of reproductive coercion. While too late for me, knowing future women might be better protected provided some comfort. My mother's grave became a place of peace again rather than refuge. I could visit without looking over my shoulder, without finding unwelcome flowers. During one visit, I encountered the woman who'd first told me about Kathy's medical background. We spoke briefly about healing, about moving forward after loss. The financial settlement allowed me to consider options I'd never imagined. Not wealth, but stability and freedom. I took courses in domestic violence advocacy, channeling my experience into helping others recognize the signs I'd missed. My home, once a prison, became a sanctuary again. The guest room where they'd locked me became my office. The nursery became a reading room. Each transformation was a small victory, reclaiming spaces that had been tainted by their control. Dr. Brennan and I maintained contact even after the divorce concluded. She'd been instrumental in my survival and recovery. Her professional validation had been the turning point when everyone else doubted me. She referred other women in similar situations to me, knowing I'd understand their experiences. 1 year after that confrontation at Mark's mother's house, I stood in my kitchen making tea. The morning light streamed through windows I'd chosen to keep uncovered. No more hiding. My phone buzzed with messages from my support network, checking in as they did regularly. I'd lost the family I'd thought I was building with Mark, lost the daughter I'd carried for 7 months, lost the future I'd envisioned. But I'd gained something harder to define. The knowledge that I'd survived, that I'd fought back, that I'd refused to let them erase me. The doorbell rang. Emma stood on my porch with coffee and pastries, our new Sunday tradition. As we settled in the living room, she mentioned a cousin who was experiencing concerning behavior from her husband. Without hesitation, I offered to meet with her, to share what I'd learned about recognizing the signs. My hand went unconsciously to my belly, a gesture I'd thought I'd lost the right to make. The doctors had confirmed what I'd hoped. Despite the trauma of the miscarriage, my body had healed. The possibility of future motherhood remained, though I wasn't ready to consider it yet. Kathy had attempted contact again recently, leaving a voicemail about how hard single motherhood was, how she needed help. I deleted it without listening to the end. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. The spring grass green paint chip remained in my memorial box, a reminder of the hope I'd once had. But now, a year later, I could look at it without falling apart. The grief had become part of me without defining me. My new therapist had helped me understand that healing wasn't about forgetting or forgiving. It was about reclaiming my narrative, rebuilding my sense of self, and moving forward with the knowledge that I'd survived something designed to destroy me. The support group met that evening. New faces appeared regularly, women recognizing their own experiences in our stories, finding strength in shared survival. We didn't offer easy answers or quick fixes, just the validation that their experiences were real, their pain was valid, and their survival was possible. As I prepared for the meeting, arranging chairs in a circle in my living room, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, isolated, gaslit, questioning my own sanity. That woman had found strength she didn't know she possessed, allies in unexpected places, and the courage to fight back against systematic destruction. The doorbell rang again as the first members arrived, women who'd become sisters through shared trauma, who understood understood without explanation why certain gestures made us flinch, why certain phrases triggered panic, why trust came slowly but ran deep when earned. We settled into our circle, cups of tea warming our hands. The newest member, referred by Dr. Brennan, looked as hollow-eyed as I once had, but she was here, taking the first step toward reclaiming her life. We would help her carry what felt unbearable, just as others had helped me. 1 year later, I stood painting a nursery spring grass green again. Not in my old home, but in a new one I'd bought with the settlement money. My hand rested on my growing belly, a pregnancy I'd chosen through donor insemination, on my terms, surrounded by the family I'd built from those who'd believed me when it mattered. The paint color was the same, but everything else had changed. This time, I painted surrounded by friends, with Emma directing placement of furniture and Janet assembling the crib. This baby would arrive into a world of chosen family, of hard-won wisdom, of a mother who'd learned her own strength. I'd lost everything I thought I needed: the husband, the traditional family structure, the naive trust in those who claimed to love me, but I'd gained something more valuable: the knowledge that I could survive betrayal, rebuild after destruction, and create a life authentic to who I really was. The nursery walls dried to the perfect shade of spring grass green. This time, they would shelter a child born not from deception and control, but from choice and hope. My daughter would grow up knowing her mother's strength, surrounded by women who understood that family wasn't just about blood, it was about who showed up when the world fell apart. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark's mother, sharing a photo from her own freshly painted guest room, spring grass green, in honor of the grandchild she'd never meet but would always mourn. We'd found our own ways to heal, to honor what was lost while building something new. Tomorrow would bring another support group meeting, another woman finding her voice, another step in the long journey of healing. But tonight, I stood in my nursery, hand on my belly, surrounded by the family I'd chosen, painting the future I'd fought to reclaim.